The death penalty has historically affected everyone differently. They either oppose it or believe in it for different reasons. In 2008, the Pew Center on the States reported that incarceration levels had risen to a point where 1 in 100 Americans were behind bars. The study that followed that the following year showed that 1 in 31 adults in the United States was either incarcerated or on probation or parole. With the incumbent number of prisons becoming increasingly overcrowded and costing taxpayers millions of dollars, why do we let murderers sit on death row? The additional cost of confining an inmate to death row as compared to the maximum security prisons where those sentenced to life without possibility of parole ordinarily serve their sentence is $90,000 per year. So, for example, California's death row population of 670 accounts for $63.3 million annually to house those inmates. So do we review the cost of imprisonment versus the cost of execution based on the state of social economics, or do we base it merely on our sense of emotion and how we feel about it as Americans, as humans? Do we take the biblical view on it, or do we take the eye for an eye view? Should money and should facts of cost play into how we deem someone's life? One contributing factor in the low execution rate is that there's actually a shortage of one of the 3 drugs that's necessary to execute someone. This drug is called barbiturate sodium thiopental. Several states have postponed executions because they do not have it. In 2011, the company that originally made it 2009, the company that originally made the drug stopped making it. And in 2011, they determined that they weren't going to continue making it or sell it at all. The only other option is to go to a company in Europe who refuses to sell the drug needed for executions, meaning they do not support executions. The penalty. Another issue is that continuing executions in the government involve several judges who support the death penalty. They've complained that Congress and the Supreme Court have raised daunting barriers for death row prisoners. Their ability to appeal over and over and over again, and in many cases, make the judges take on their own colleagues. The appeal process is so long that it costs more money, allowing them to continually appeal over and over and over again and extending their life, basically. But then you have the argument, what if they're innocent? What is the percentage of those that are on death row that are actually innocent? We've recently heard of several stories where 25 years later, somebody that had been sentenced to death actually was innocent. So what do we do? Is it a moral issue? Is it an economical issue? Just recently, the woman who was notorious for the dingo ate my baby, that was in prison for 25 years, was found not guilty. She spent 25 years behind bars and was released once they found the correct evidence. In 2010, the Gallup poll showed that 64% of Americans support the death penalty. More and more states have moved away from it due to cost, political outcomes, lack of the sodium thiopental that they need. So by allowing politics to dictate crime and punishment, we are overpopulating our prisons with so many different types of prisoners. For example, murderers and gangbangers are now in a 4x4 cell with an 18-year-old that may have a less offensive of a crime due to overcrowding. Do we honestly think that there is a higher chance of rehabilitating that 18-year-old after he has been exposed to those type of influences? I don't. I think that we're just breeding a new level of criminal inside our own penitentiaries because of the fact that the overpopulation, the cost to execute, the lack of execution, we're not handling those situations well. So where does the solution lie? If an eye for an eye methodology is outdated, How does the judicial system properly place the inmates? The only way to effectively manage this system is by moving it from being a government-run facility to a privately owned establishment. By doing this, guards, counselors, they would be invested in the outcome of the inmates, which would hopefully empower them when they finish their sentences, and then they could be productive members of society. One of the things you will often hear from somebody that has served many years in prison, when they get out, their rehabilitation rate is extremely low. They're more comfortable in prison where they know the lifestyle and are with people that are similar to them than on the outside. 2 in every 5 inmates that come out will repeat the same crime. So we need to do something different. We either need to increase the number of executions so that we can thin out, for lack of a better word, thin out some of the overcrowded jail cells. We need to separate inmates by class and by classification, meaning that they need to be separated not only by their crime, but also by the type of person that they are. So that when they're in there, not that it's a buddy system or anything on those levels, but so that when they're in prison, they are separated into groups where they're not going to be learning new bad habits from somebody else. Should a guy that has 3 DUIs and have to do 2 years in prison be sitting next to a man that's a rapist or a child molester or an armed robber? What is he going to gain from this experience other than learning that lifestyle and hearing those things and being exposed to something completely different? We need to make a difference. We need to reevaluate whether an eye for an eye is outdated, or if we should move those systems from government control to private management. Something has to be done today before it affects the rest of us even longer.